Welcome to Inside Carolina's Noon Dish. I'm your host, Tommy Ashley. That's Don Callahan. We're sponsored by Johnny T-Shirt, JohnnyT-Shirt.com, and Congruity. Don Callahan on location at North Carolina football camp. I've got your back, Don. So if the ball comes that way, I hope your internet doesn't glitch because you might get taken out here on live TV. Shout out to the folks that have already joined us. Don, tell us a little bit about where you are, what you're doing today.
I am in the indoor practice facility and UNC's 7-on-7 camps. This is the third of four is going on today. So we decided to try something a little bit different and maybe take a little bit of a break between, or actually during the actual camp to talk to you guys. How's everything going as far as sound and all that?
You sound good. Internet kind of is what it is. If folks have not been there before, Don is in the very nice indoor facility on Chapel Hill's campus. Sounds good so far. We'll see. As long as you survive a overthrown pass at the goal line, we'll be good here.
Yeah.
And they don't run you out of there when they see we're doing this live. But Don, it's camp season. It's hot. So I titled this "The Heat Is On" for UNC football recruiting. How important has these past few weeks and this next couple of weeks for Carolina football recruiting here in the 25 class is the highlight here, maybe the 26 class and the 27s.
Yeah, so there's two aspects to this. One is the official visits, which I know we'll get into. We'll spend most of our time on in this podcast talking about. UNC hosted 3 official visitors this past weekend. It wasn't a lot just because Father's Day was Sunday. And then they'll host 5 this coming weekend. And then as people who've been following it know, they had a mega weekend 2 weekends back, which 11 official visitors. And God, 3 weekends back, my brain's a little fried. I can't remember how many. I feel like it was like a handful of guys at that point also. So from a current class standpoint, it's been big. But you also have a bunch of laying the groundwork for the 2026 and even the 2027 class going on. Today, North Carolina has Jacob Smith, a quarterback UNC has offered from the 26 class. He's here performing at the 7-on-7. Tomorrow's 7-on-7 will have Grimsley, which has Faison Brandon, will be national quarterback. 24/7 Sports has him the number 1 player in the nation for the 2026 class. And then also Zaid Lott, a quarterback from Charlotte that North Carolina has offered. He's actually replacing Jaden Davis at Providence Day High School. So it'll be interesting to see him. I mean, it actually wouldn't be so interesting to see him because he's actually quarterbacked this offense a bunch, including, I think maybe it wasn't last year, maybe it was the year before. He was here performing with Providence Day. But it's going to be cool to kind of see them kind of work almost side by side tomorrow and then kind of compare what we saw with Jacob Smith today.
So just sort of tell everybody the importance of these 7-on-7 camps. Obviously, football is a game of the trenches. We know that. But 7-on-7 really highlights the skill guys and gives coaching staffs across the country, but specifically here for our purposes, Carolina, to see these guys in action up close. Just what's the importance there?
Yeah, so, Alex Mars, when we had him as a guest, I guess it was a couple of weeks ago, or maybe longer than that, he kind of mentioned that, and he's right, in that, top recruits aren't camping anymore. So if you want to get them on campus, if you want to kind of see them kind of, work, so to speak, you have to get them on these these 7-on-7s. And they're, anyone who's been to a 7-on-7, it's very similar to any, travel or AAU basketball. Whereas, it doesn't matter at the end of the day who wins, who loses. But if you're watching, you're going to see a little bit behind me. It certainly does matter to these people playing. You're going to see people getting really irate with referees. And so it's very, very competitive. And for UNC, not only are you getting these top recruits on campus, but you're able to see them in a competitive atmosphere, see what type of leaders they are, see how they perform under pressure, see what happens when they encounter some adversity and that sort of thing. But really, it's about getting these kids on campus, getting them using your facilities, having the coaches see them in person, having the coaches talk to them, and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, and like you said, the competition was hot right before we went on. It was a little heated behind Don, so
Yeah.
we wish Don great safety here over the next 30, 45 minutes when we're talking. Don, let's look back this past weekend. We had discussion last week about the importance of the official visits and all, and then this past weekend you mentioned Father's Day may have kept the crowd down a little bit, but there were 3 pretty important ones for North Carolina.
Yeah, so 2 wide receivers, and for those who have been following this, North Carolina has been heavily pursuing 4 wide receivers for basically 2 spots. Maybe they make room and try to sign 3, but the two other ones took their official visits the weekend prior. That was Malik Clark and why am I going blank now? Evan Haynes from Atlanta, from the Atlanta area. And so this past weekend, it was Micah Matthews, a 4-star guy from Virginia, and Snook Peterkin, a 4-star guy from Winston-Salem, taking their official visit. So that was kind of the main focus, were those 2, and just kind of getting those official visits. I don't want to say out of the way, but getting those done to kind of see where things kind of sit with UNC's wide receiver board. And then the third official visitor was Tayshawn Austin, who's an edge rusher that UNC has really been recruiting for a very long time. He has official visits scheduled also to, South Carolina and Rutgers. He had one scheduled to Virginia Tech this coming weekend, but that has since been canceled.
When you look at these, and obviously if you're a Tar Pit Premium message board person, you've seen Don's reports. There's individual interviews or individual articles on each player that Don's discussing. And I don't want to give too much of that away because you got to pay for it. It is this man is sweating and working hard, and we want people to pay for the information that he so provides. But Don, when we're talking about decision times, you mentioned other guys have more visits to take. At what point should these guys that are visiting in the month of June, however many there are, 20 or 30 guys, when should we start seeing some decisions being made? Is that still some ways off? They've got senior years coming up, or senior seasons coming up before we know it. Seems like a lot of guys like to get it out of the way before that.
Yeah, so definitely before the football season begins. So I think you'll see a lot of guys commit in July. The strange thing is that there haven't been any commitments this month. And if you remember last year and the year before, there were a bunch of commitments in July, but there was also a bunch of commitments in June. Guys were taking, 1 or 2 official visits and then just canceling the rest of their schedule and making their decision. We're not seeing that, at least from North Carolina's perspective. We're not seeing that so far, but there are a lot of guys who will be deciding, and North Carolina will definitely be, a strong factor, if not the selection, in July. And I think really you're seeing kids this year, and I don't know if it's, because it's only 1 year, it's a small sample size, but you're seeing this year, kids are actually more likely to take all of their official visits. Whereas I mentioned, the prior couple of summers, kids might have a full allotment scheduled, but they would only make it to 1 or 2.
When you look at it, you mentioned 4 wide receivers for 2 or maybe 3 spots. What is the coaching staff looking at there? Is it first come, first serve? Are there preferences that you can tell? These guys, are they very different style-wise and what they bring to the table? Just sort of highlight that a little bit for us.
Yeah, so I think that there are definitely preferences involved, but I think also there is also, and Mack has mentioned this a bunch, and I think even like Pat Sudis has mentioned this when we've had him on, that the evaluation process is still ongoing. So there are definitely situations, and there have been in the past. I can't think of any this cycle yet, but there have been the prior cycles when you have a kid, you bring them on for an official visit. They obviously have their family with them and that sort of thing. And then you're talking to them, you're talking to the family, you're getting a kind of feel for everybody, and you're thinking, hey, maybe this is not a fit. And so I don't know, I'm sure that the staff would probably love for something like that to happen, because I think there's a lot of splitting of hairs when you're talking about these 4 wide receivers, because all 4 are really, really good players. There's been a bunch of debate on the message boards about, what North Carolina should do, and North Carolina should definitely take this guy and that sort of thing. But the reality is it's a little bit of a beauty is in the eye of the beholder sort of situation. These official visits do kind of hopefully will help them a little bit try to figure out personality fits and mentality fits and family fits and that sort of thing.
When you're watching, when you're covering the recruiting aspect of it, and this is a question I haven't asked you before, I don't think, but how much do you, as a recruiting analyst and an expert in this stuff, pay attention to where these guys also visit?
Oh yeah, for people who follow me, visits I feel like is our best, I guess, piece of evidence that we can lean on to determine just exactly what schools a recruit is interested in and what schools are actually interested in those recruits. Because it's not 100% foolproof. Nothing is, but you are. If we take any one of these kids, most of them have like 40 something offers, and most of those offers are not committable. They're basically BS. But you see who they're visiting, who they're being brought in, and we've talked about this before. Schools only get 56 official visits. Well, you're not just going to give that to anybody. Now, telling some kid you have a scholarship offer to try to get them on campus or to try to get them interested, that's different. That's easy. You get infinite amount of those. It takes hardly any effort. But the official visit stuff, you only get 56, so it's a little bit more valuable. So it's a little bit more telling about who, basically what the market looks like for each recruit. I mentioned Tayshawn Austin. Clearly his market is South Carolina, North Carolina, and Rutgers. Those are the schools who are truly interested in him. Could other schools pop up in the end? Sure. Could schools drop out? Yeah, we saw Virginia Tech drop out. But, that gives us a true gauge of just each kid's sort of situation.
What's up when you have one of those situations where the official visits, like one of these schools does not belong? You know how we've done that before? Like,
yeah.
What's the Rutgers pool for Austin, in your opinion? Family?
Yeah.
Or?
I haven't dug too deep into that, so I don't know. Mostly because you got to feel like if North Carolina truly wants him, they're going to beat out Rutgers for an in-state kid. You know what I mean? But what I will say is that Rutgers, I believe, signed one or two out of the Tar Heel State last class. And, Shiano's a great recruiter, considering what he's dealing with, he's signed some decent classes. And so I think it's a little bit of that and him being a defensive guy and recognizing, even though Austin is, in the state of North Carolina, not an area that they recruit a ton, that he's a good player. But really, I think Rutgers is just trying to kind of spread out a little bit more because, like I said, there's a lot more offers being sent out to North Carolina kids from that school.
When you look at Big Ten, SEC, and we've talked about the SEC pool with recruits all the time, and I'm not talking about Georgia, Alabama, Florida, the big schools, quote unquote, the big of the bunch down there. Is there a draw for kids to go to different schools in these conferences, Rutgers being one in the Big Ten, which still sounds funny, even Maryland, to be able to play against those teams? Is that a big deal? Because obviously with conference realignment in the forefront all the time, everybody talks about the Big Two conferences or the P2 or whatever they want to call them. Is there some sort of pull to go to maybe a quote-unquote lesser school, and I don't mean that in a negative way, but you know what I'm talking about, to be able to play against those big-time schools and get your name out there, especially with the transfer portal being what it is these days?
Yeah, I don't think I picked that up too much. There's definitely like a pull for if you get an SEC offer, even if it is Kentucky or Mississippi State, kids will say, oh, that's the SEC. I don't sense that too much from at least kids in North Carolina saying, oh, this is a Big Ten school. This is going to be – I don't think the kids get really tied up in the whole like the conference alignment shifts as much as the fans do. You know what I mean? And we've talked about this so much is if you don't have teenagers or you haven't recently had teenagers, it's really difficult to kind of just understand that I have one teenager staring at me right now. It's very difficult to understand if that they are just in their own little bubble of social media and TikTok and that sort of thing. and that the conference realignment is, I'm sure they're well aware of it, but they aren't following it on a day-to-day basis like us crazy old people do.
Old people, speak for yourself, brother. And I still can't. Now I'm going to start wishing for somebody to throw a ball over there so you can get run over. What have been your takeaways maybe from the last couple weeks? How Carolina's been doing these official visits. Has there been any difference? Obviously, we talked to Sudis, we talked to Alex White, we talked to Alex Mars. Have you seen any shift in how they've done things this year versus in the past, or is it just go with what works, you think?
Yeah, I think it's been pretty similar, to what they've been doing. I think they have adjusted to just, for a while there, we would have official visits and you'd have a few guys come in, and it usually, if we go back over 10 years, official visits were taking place either during the season or right after the season in a little different environment. But now for June, everyone was packing them in, and there were some weeks or weekends, I felt like in the past couple of years, where the staff was a little bit overwhelmed because you're bringing in so many guys. And if you look at even that big weekend for North Carolina, it was 11 recruits, but I think it was 5 of them were uncommitted. And so we talked about this before. 7 of them are, I'm sorry, no, maybe it was 4 of them were uncommitted. 7 of them were committed. Those guys are a little bit less maintenance, and you can do a lot of different things with them that you don't need to, that you want to make sure you emphasize with uncommitted guys, because obviously the committed guys are committed. You're not really trying to get them to choose your school because they already have. So that kind of lessens the pressure of the weekend stuff. But, this weekend's going to be an interesting weekend because we have 5 guys coming in, and I think it's 3 uncommitted recruits.
What's the what have you gleaned as the policy on committed recruits visiting or officially visiting elsewhere? That seems like that's been a thing.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm sure it doesn't make the staff happy, but we know that Marshall Pritchard took an official visit to Alabama this past weekend, and from everything that I gauged is that Pritchard and his family expressed to UNC that there was nothing to worry about with that visit. I go into a little bit more detail about it, I think, in the official visit scoop that I posted over the weekend. But yeah, I mean, clearly it's being allowed. I mean, it's just, for North Carolina, it's really tough. I mean, do you just cut bait just because of that? So it's a tough situation.
Don Callahan with the fishing reference. Nice there. We're talking with Don Callahan. He is live on scene in Chapel Hill, covering some high school recruiting, 7-on-7 camps and all that. And, of course, he's double duties as Noon Dish co-host here. I'm Tommy Ashley. Don, before we look ahead, anything from the past, from today, in the last 3 weeks that we haven't talked about here on the Noon Dish that you felt like we should have?
Well, the one is Christian Evans, and he took an official visit earlier during that first weekend of June. And even heading into the month, it seemed like North Carolina was kind of the team to beat. And, some things have just kind of happened the past few weeks where he's going to stay in state, and he's from Virginia. So that's not good for North Carolina. And I think it's just, a family situation where the desire to stay in state was miscalculated by, really him and his family, to be honest. But that ended up winning out, and I think you're going to see him commit to another school not named North Carolina soon.
Yeah, and, of course, North Carolina, the recruiting never stops. Even when they're committed, schools still, you don't burn the bridges. We talked about that a lot on this show, is just because somebody goes elsewhere, just because Don Callahan left me hanging on Tuesday when we've been doing these shows, didn't mean I didn't show up today to get this done.
Hey, I gave you the option. I just thought it would be cool to just have the background. I mean, so
let me. This is relevant to Kendra Harrison, Michael Matthews. How important is other sport options for these high-level recruits? Realistically, How
I mean,
important is that?
for a kid like Kendra Harrison, it's huge. And then even I think we might even see it with a kid like Micah Matthews, who is a high-level baseball recruit also, and how that impacts things for him. I mean, if North Carolina lands Micah Matthews, for example, it will be a major part of that will be because of the baseball program, and he's basically, I mean, he took official visits North Carolina, Virginia Tech, Virginia, and Utah, and really from if you're and we cover this in a couple of the scoops that we've done recently. The main difference is North Carolina's baseball team. And when I talked to him following his official visit to North Carolina, he mentioned the fact that the baseball team was in Omaha multiple times. And just talking to some sources who spent some time with him over the weekend, they said all they do is talk about baseball. They're big baseball junkies. So obviously, Tommy, you know better than me, but what's Virginia Tech's baseball program look like compared to North Carolina's?
Virginia Tech was decent this year. They kind of fell off later in the season. They started hot, but Virginia's a good baseball program. They've always been a good baseball program. Of course, Carolina walked them off. But to talk about Carolina's baseball program being a factor, I mean, does he look at a guy like Caleb Cost?
Yeah,
done it or doing it. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, and he was his player host for the weekend, which was obviously a smart move by the UNC staff, because then you're putting him with a kid who's balancing the two sports and telling him exactly how that's being done. And Mack has mentioned it a bunch of times during his press conferences, and that how that balance is done, and because it's not easy. And there's a lot of I would imagine there are coaches who say, hey, you could play both sports and maybe not fulfill that promise. But clearly Mack has definitely lived to his word with those situations.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that I find having real life examples that are the kid's age or the player's age is big for them, because, like you said, old men can tell the stories all they want, but then when they have a fellow classmate or a fellow cohort that can tell you, yeah, this works and this is how it is. And of course, Cost had baseball experience and played some at Carolina before a little injury kept him out, and now I guess he's full bore football now that the season's over. I'm going to talk about Johnny T-Shirt, JohnnyT-Shirt.com, sponsors of this podcast. 10% off your order if you're a premium member, and you get Don Callahan. You get 10% and you get Don Callahan. Not quite sure who's worth more there, but Don's work is definitely worth every penny you spend on the Inside Carolina Premium subscriptions. Check them out. Go to Johnny T-Shirt online or in person. Get all the swag. We mentioned baseball. Get the sweet baseball jerseys. And it is what? June 19th. Football season will be here in days. 70-some days. Carolina plays Minnesota. Get your Johnny T-Shirt swag. Also, congruityhr.com/Tar Heels for your free to small mid-sized business assessment. Locally owned, local business, national brand. Go to see them. Don, this coming weekend. Well, the rest of this week, you mentioned tomorrow's a big day, on 7-on-7. What does that look like from your standpoint, a big 7-on-7 day? Obviously, we won't be doing this live tomorrow. No. So what will Don Callahan be doing on those days?
So, well, a lot of watching, a lot of filming, a lot of taking some photos. Grimsley is one of the schools going to be here, and I mentioned Faison Brandon. He's the quarterback there. I mentioned Z-Lot is the quarterback for Providence Day. They'll be here. We talked about Kendra Harrison. Reidsville is going to be here. Huff is going to be here. So that means Samari Matthews. So a lot of running around trying to watch as many teams as I can, and hopefully I can kind of squeeze it all in together and see as much as I can. But it should be a really competitive day. Usually I only stay for the pool play because that gives me 5 games to watch, and which is a total of 10 teams, because obviously there's 2 teams per game.
Yeah,
but But just from a competitive standpoint, I might stay a little bit longer to see who ends up winning this. And you'll probably stay has a really good record when it comes to these 7-on-7s, but the competition is pretty steep for tomorrow.
Yeah, so folks that aren't familiar with it, how's it work? I mean, it's pool play, so you got. I guess they try to set up like teams, or so it's not blowouts. But you have pool play, and then it goes into sort of elimination play, and then there's a champion crowned at the end of the day. How many games will these kids play per day?
So the teams are guaranteed 5, which is the 5 pool play, and then usually they have. I think they try to shoot for 20 teams, and I think it's 20 teams, and then they break those teams into 20 teams, and they break those teams into 3 pods, and the 3 pods will kind of play all the teams in their pods and within their pod, and then based off of the schedule, they will they'll seed them in a playoff. So I'd have to go and double check, but I believe about half of the teams end up leaving after the 5 games, and then the ones who have the better records will go into, and I believe it's a single elimination tournament to see who is going to be that day's winner.
Yep. So a lot of football to be played. How long are games? Like, just educate us.
Yeah, so the games are, I mean, this is a good question. So I have only the start times, but so I believe the games are about 25, 30 minutes, or maybe it's about 20 minutes. It could be, let's see. I can tell you. I have the actual, I don't have.
There appears to be a break. We started this show 26 minutes ago, and the game started.
Yeah, so it's about 20 minutes, I think.
And so now the game is over, and they keep score, and they have officials out there and all that.
The officials, the clock doesn't stop. So basically, you're playing throughout. Everybody's on the same clock. They use the clocks throughout the facility to kind of, and you get plenty of warnings about, this is a 7-minute warning before the next game starts up. So you get plenty of warnings about that sort of stuff. So yeah, and then they have points, obviously touchdowns, and you have the opportunity to go for 2. Obviously, there's no kicking, but whether you go for 1 or 2, it determines how far away you are from the end zone. You do get points for defensive stops, and then you get points for interceptions. So the point system can be a little wacky.
Yeah, it is an exciting thing to watch. Guys competing. Guys want to win. I mean, it might be camps and it might be in the middle of the summer, but those dudes want to win. And we've heard some legendary 7-on-7 teams have been around. Don will be there tomorrow to highlight those. Don, this coming weekend, talk about the official visits, the importance of the official visits.
So, so there's, as I said, 2 commits. One is your favorite commit, Camden Lodenslager, and JV Butts. I guess maybe they're both your favorate commits.
Wow. I like
two
JV
great last names. Yeah, you cannot lie.
It's going off the rails in a hurry.
I wonder how many times he's heard that in his life. And then for the uncommitted guys, we have an offensive lineman from Texas. I'm going blank on his name now.
Who didn't give me the list, so.
What's that?
You did not give me the list, so I don't have it in front of me, and you're on the spot.
Byron Nelson from Katy, Texas. He's a guy who UNC hasn't technically offered yet, but they said as soon as you come on campus, you will have an offer. He's definitely a guy UNC really wants. He's already officially visited Vanderbilt and Pitt, so that's the competition there. And then we have Julian Horton, who's committed to Maryland, so that's a flip situation. North Carolina is the only school outside of Maryland who has an official visit schedule with him, but Michigan actually offered him earlier this month. And so that's, I would imagine, is a situation where the Wolverines are kind of keeping them warm a little bit to see just kind of what happens with some other targets that they maybe have higher on their board. So that's kind of a situation. If North Carolina were to flip him, they kind of have to monitor a little bit. And then Bo Walker, a running back we've talked a little bit, who's committed to Georgia. That's an interesting situation because when he committed to Georgia last October or November, Del McGee was the running back coach at Georgia. He has since left to become the head coach at Georgia State. And then obviously when you bring in, a new running back coach, we talk about it a lot, and we probably should talk about it even more. The beauty is in the eye of the beholder sort of situation. And, new coach, the new running back coach, I don't think was as high on him as the old running back coach. That opened the door for some other schools, North Carolina being one of them. but I think Georgia kind of missed on some of their top targets, which has perhaps kind of made it a little bit more difficult for North Carolina to kind of flip him eventually. But he's going to be officially visiting this weekend, so we'll see what kind of happens with that. And you never know what could happen potentially with Georgia's running back situation.
Yeah, Bo Walker, what a name! That I've said it before on this show. What a blend of Bo Jackson and Herschel Walker, folks. He's got something to live up to if he's going to run around with that kind of name. Got a question from Tyler Woods in the chat. Tyler, let's have some positive Wednesday positivity here, Tyler. But we're going to ask the questions right here. Can you see the board, Don?
Yes.
With all the remaining DL targets headed elsewhere, are we saving those spots for transfers, or will the board expand?
So I think it's going to be a little bit of both. I think this. I was just talking to a source, and they mentioned that they definitely have some high school D linemen on their radar, and they're going to look at to see just if they've developed and that sort of thing. They did the same sort of situation last year when they needed a D lineman to kind of close out the class. And I think there's not as much urgency as there was with last year. So there's definitely, it definitely could be where they evaluate some guys. They try to look to see if anyone kind of late develops sort of situation. And if nothing there they like, they just kind of move on at the position. But it's definitely a possibility that they add through the high school ranks. And then, but I think regardless, do you know who that was?
Yeah.
Okay.
I was going to let it slide. So
yeah. But I have a helper today. So, but
she looked very happy to be there.
Yeah. Well, she has some teams here who she has friends are on those teams. So she asked me each day which teams are going to be there. Anyway, great photographer though.
Jeez.
Well, okay. Oh, but I think regardless of what they do, regardless of if they expand the high school board or not, I think you're going to see the staff hit the portal for D linemen just because it's a position that North Carolina is going to lose players at from graduation following this season. That's kind of been the tell when it comes to whether whether UNC pursues a position in the portal.
All right, another question from Tyler. If you got some questions for Don here in the last little bit of this show, get them in here. How does Showcase Camp look this year? Expecting a big list. I mean, the biggest name would be me if I go cover it with Don. That would be the one Don's looking most forward to seeing. That's still to be determined. Depends on how much NIL money Don has. But seriously, what's the Showcase Camp look like for Carolina this year?
Yeah, so it's very early on in me kind of gathering who could be there. I will say it looks like Kendra Harrison will not be there now. Now, he will be here tomorrow for the 7-on-7, but I think he had some family situation that kind of came up this weekend, so I believe he's going to miss it. But Bryce Baker, I know, is going to be there. And a lot of the quarterbacks that North Carolina is recruiting for the 2026 class will actually be there. And there's a couple of other guys that UNC has offered. But as I said, putting together a list now, I probably should have a I guess a preview list that I'll be able to post. But that with it being a Sunday and with so much else going on, I probably won't be able to post something or put something like that together until like later on this week, late this week, really.
Here's a $64,000 question from Steve Brown. London Merritt, somebody we've talked about fairly good amount on this show.
Yeah, so I'm supposed to actually speak with him and his dad soon, and I'll get like the official word sort of thing. But I don't think it's looking good. Just kind of little tidbits kind of picking up. But that's kind of North Carolina was trying to pry him away from Ohio State, so that was never going to be an easy situation. Behind me in 23, if you can see, that's Omarion Blue, AJ Blue's son. So Jordan High School in Durham must be playing behind me.
Nice, he's got the right color jersey on. What do you think about NIL in high school, Don? I've never asked you that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a believer in you get whatever you can get. You know what I mean? I would hope that that no high school would give a kid, or no boosters or whatever will give a kid money or the family money to try to get them to come to their high school. I feel that, is kind of dirty. But I can remember when Chaz Surratt was a high school football player, and him and his brother were on a billboard for the local orthodontist. I never asked, I never mentioned it because I was afraid I would get someone in trouble. But there's a very good chance that they used his name, image, and likeness for free, and benefited from it, which is unfortunate because Chaz and Sage Surratt should have received money for that. But those sort of situations I think are great. Especially if you play at a small, like a small town school where high school football is big. I think it'd be awesome if the quarterback was on a billboard, or made an appearance at the local car dealership or whatever to sign autographs, takes pictures. I think that's awesome. But obviously for the pay for play sort of stuff is dirty and sleazy, and that obviously would get involved with this too.
Yeah, it's crazy times, man. 100%. Anything left for us to talk about here on the noon dish? I want you to turn your attention to your work and not to me here. But what's left? What are we going to be looking to talk about? We talked about some commitments, possibly, or expected commitments, not necessarily from specific players, but just in general over the next several weeks. But your thoughts on how things are going for North Carolina recruiting?
Yeah, I mean it has looked promising, and I know that it kind of feels not so promising right now because of situations like the Christian Evans and London Merritt not coming to fruition also. But if UNC were to land Malik Clark and Micah Matthews, I mean those are two 4-star wide receivers they'd be adding to the roster. And so I think I do think we gotta have to look at things a little bit differently. I think high school classes are going to be a lot smaller than what they have been, just because you have to make sure you have space for the transfer portal. And so I don't think that we can look at it like we used to look at it and be like, oh, this is just a failure of a class. I think you got to look at, well, who was North Carolina pursuing? Because there's an awful lot of guys that if UNC just wanted to add even 4-stars. I mean, there was one 4-star DB that North Carolina was pursuing, and a high 3-star guy. Dalen Pelton was a 4-star cornerback, and then Corey Cross was a high 3-star guy that UNC said, hey, we're not going to take you. And if they were just trying to pile up stars and get a great ranking, then they could have taken those guys. But the reality is they saw much more value in saving those spots for the transfer portal. And so we have to kind of look at things a little bit differently now.
We've talked a lot about wins and losses, program prestige, trajectory, all that stuff. Where is Carolina in that mix now? Mack Brown's in what, year 6?
Yeah.
This season, everybody's a little hesitant to think they're going to be any good. I think the schedule is what it is. I think 8, 9 win seasons definitely on the table, if not likely. Where are we in the Don Callahan
don't put
trajectory thing? Yeah, I mean, we talked about the prestige.
Yeah,
with college, with NCAA coming out this summer, where's Carolina's prestige?
So the way I like to phrase this best is, if you were to take a random, I don't want to say random, maybe like a high school kid in Arizona who at least follows college football to some degree, what's their view of UNC? And you got to feel like they view UNC as maybe not an ACC contending school, but a high-level ACC school. Am I fair in saying that? Because they haven't, consistently competed or consistently be a challenger, but they have good draft picks the past few years. They're in that upper echelon every year, but just can't kind of get over that hump. What do you say?
I think the brand outweighs the product.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
I can agree with that.
And I think what gets me about it is a lot of people think that they wasted Sam Howell or Drake May or whatever. But no, they actually won more games than they traditionally won. having those guys as quarterbacks. And so I think that's worth something. I think that for Carolina to continue to be relevant, hey, we can talk about the conference affiliation. That's going on in the chat over here. Everybody knows where I stand on that. But as far as on the football field, you need to win 9. You need to win 9 games a year in this day and age. 8 used to be a big deal. Going to a bowl used to be a big deal. It's not anymore, especially with 12 games, possibly 13 or 14. So I think Carolina's in that mix here, and I think for Mack to keep it going up, however slowly up we want to talk about, is one thing. But to keep it going up, they need to win 9 ball games, and they need to do it and highlight players they've developed, but also do it with some guys they've been able to get out of the portal, because I think the portal is the way this day and age, and I think it's going to stay that way as long as money and the rules the way they are going to be. I don't know if that's too deep for this show, but that's where I'm at on it.
Yeah, I mean, that is probably like a huge can of worms that we can get into and talk about for like an hour, but I know we're trying to wrap this up now.
We are. Top 5. There have been some suggestions. Preston said top 5 Tommy pet peeves. We're not going to do that. This show is about Don Callahan. Top 5 positions, players you are most optimistic about this upcoming season. Can you answer that question? I know you're a recruiting guy. Can you answer?
Well, number 1 would be receiver.
All right.
You know, I mean, I'm really optimistic about receiver. I'd have to kind of think about this. Maybe we should hold that top 5 for next week.
Okay, we can do that. So James Cummings, your top 5 position players you're most optimistic about this upcoming season, we will do next week as our top 5. And our chat MVP, we will announce that next week as well.
Maybe we'll have 2.
Yeah, we'll have 2. And Don Callahan with the bucket hat. That
I gotta. So I gotta actually give a shout. I don't know. I have to look in my PMs for it. But somebody recommended me get this bucket hat from the IC board. I bought it. It's been awesome. The great part about it is that I obviously sweat like hell when I have it on, but I just throw it into the washer and hey, it's still all good. You know what I mean?
Are we trying to get a sponsorship here? What's the brand?
I don't know the brand, to be honest. The person who recommended, I can't really take it off because of the mic, but the person who recommended to me just sent me the Amazon link, and I was like, all right, let's try this, and boom, purchased it, came like 2 days later, and it's been great.
We need a Don Callahan picture holding a camera, wearing some cargo shorts, filming 7-on-7 camp. We need that. Holler at your helper and tell her that's what she needs to send me.
Okay. All right. That sounds good.
Anything left before we let you get out of here?
No, I think.
Is it hot in the indoor?
No, the indoor is absolutely wonderful.
Yes.
Absolutely wonderful. I mean, you got a breeze going. I mean, I don't know. I have no idea what the temperature actually is, but it is wonderful in here.
Yeah, you see look to your left. You see the hill? We need you to run. We need you to go run the hill for punishment.
Yeah, I'm not running that hill. You can see the sun. The sun just. I mean, punishment. You just lay on that hill. The sun is just beaming down on that hill.
I remember we covered one of those practices in August last year, and those dudes were out there running, getting reps in after practice, I think it was. And I mean, it was like an oven. You could have fried an egg, a cookie, a steak, anything you wanted on that turf out there. So, shout out to Don for covering it. Shout out to all the people participating. Shout out to the Noon Dish. It's been a Johnny T-shirt and Congruity production. Don, appreciate it, my friend.
All right. Thank you for holding it down, Tommy, with the crappy internet I guess I have.
No, it's been pretty good. It's kind of frozen you in some good spots sometimes, but have fun and be safe.
All right. See you later. Appreciate it.